Hello, friends. Welcome back to the While We're Waiting Hope After Child Loss podcast. I'm Jill Sullivan, your host and one of the co founders of the While We're Waiting ministry. This is a podcast of stories of devastating loss and grief and heartbreak and struggle, and stories of hope and healing and faith and, yes, even joy. Underlying every conversation is the hope we have in Jesus Christ, which makes it possible to not just survive the loss of a child, but to live well while we're waiting to see them again in heaven one day. You can learn more about our ministry and the free bereaved parent retreats we host by visiting our website at www.whilewe'rewaiting.org. Welcome to episode number 230. I'm so excited today to introduce you to my friend Lynda Wake. Lynn and her husband have served with Wycliffe Bible Translators since 1998 and currently reside in Melbourne, Australia. She's a grandmother of 2 and a mom of 4, including her daughter Bethany Joy, who lived her brief life to the max. She's the author of 2 devotional books, Heartbreakingly Beautiful and Waiting Well with Jesus, and the founder of Be Blessings Ministry. Lynn will be my guest over the next 2 episodes as she shares God's faithfulness in her journey with Bethany, which is remarkably similar to my own. I believe you'll be blessed by our conversation today. Hi, Lynn. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jill. It's a real privilege.
Yes, I have been looking forward to visiting with you, and I think our guests can already tell that you are not from the United States. Would you tell
hmm
us where you're from and what life is like for you there?
Great. Well, I'll say g'day from Australia.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm an Aussie girl from Melbourne, Australia, and we're in the middle of spring right now. So I can look out this morning here and evening for you guys,
Yes.
and it's going to be a beautiful spring morning over here in Melbourne. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And what do you do there in Melbourne?
So my husband David and I work for Wycliffe Bible Translators. Been working in that ministry since 1998. It's incredible. And we've been involved with all sorts of things, like mostly helping in Outback Australia and in the Pacific region, just helping people, supporting the translators, supporting the Bible translation movement with all sorts of jobs. So it's a pretty exciting ministry to be involved with. And yeah, the Lord is doing a lot of great things around the world, getting the Bible into all the languages of the world. So yeah, we feel very excited to be part of that. And we've just come back from Vanuatu, actually, Jill, just having a bit of
Yes.
time serving there. So that's been, yeah, we escaped the Melbourne winter actually, and which was great. Yeah, but I'm involved with some writing for Wycliffe and some member care. That's my main role.
Very good. And tell me about your family a little bit.
Sure. So we've been blessed to, yeah, have a son, James, who married beautiful Melissa, and so they've given us 2 gorgeous grandchildren now. So we have little Zalia Joy and Bonnie May, who I get to babysit usually every Friday, which is awesome. So the Lord has also given us 3 daughters. 2 are still with us on earth, and their names are Rachel and Nicole. Rachel has moved out of home last year, serving as a nurse and midwife, and Nicole is still at home with us, studying a science degree at university. So we have Nicole and we have another boarder living with us. So we still have 2 beautiful young women living in our home and looking after them. We live next door to David's father, so we kind of all look out for each other.
Sure. Sounds like you have a busy household.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we're here today to talk about your daughter, Bethany Joy.
Mhm.
First, I would love to know how you chose her name.
Well, when I was growing up, there was this gorgeous nurse with long dark hair. She was in our church, and I always used to go to church as a little girl and look up to her, and her name was Beth. And I thought she was the kindest, loveliest lady. I still know her today, actually. And she is still kind and lovely. But I always had that name, Beth. And then when I went to Bible school, the very first day that I arrived there, I was handed a little baby, newborn baby, and her name was Bethany. And I thought, oh, Beth, Bethany. Oh, I even like that better.
Yes.
So when David and I married, I said, if we ever have a daughter, I think I've already got that name. You can choose the boy's name. I've got the girl's name.
I love
And
it.
Joy is a family name. I was named after my auntie. I'm Lynda Joy, or Lynn to my friends.
Uh-huh.
And and so we've named all our daughters, given them that middle name, Joy.
Oh, they all have the same middle name. Oh, I
Yeah,
love that.
which now we're so grateful for that, because that's a real
Yes.
connection with all the girls and with their
Right.
mum. Mhm.
Right. Well, and as you know, I'm partial to both of those names because I have a
Mhm.
Bethany, Bethany Grace, and Hannah's middle name was Joy, Hannah
That's
Joy.
right. Yes.
So that's pretty special. I love that
It
name.
is, Jill. Yeah,
Yeah. All right. Well, take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about Bethany Joy. Help us get to know her.
sure. Wow. So our son James, I'll go back a stage there. So he's quite the serious firstborn, a quieter, considerate, thoughtful little boy he was.
Yeah.
And then we had a little girl who was almost the opposite. Not that she wasn't thoughtful, but she would, well, we'd arrive at a playground and James would carefully look around the playground and work out what'll I do first, and do some risk assessment. And
Sure.
but Bethany would just run straight to the playground and just whee, life was fun. Look,
Yes.
she was an extreme extrovert, Jill. Almost from the time she was aware of anyone, she was looking around to see what people were around, and she just loved people, always looking out for family. And actually, she got a nickname, which was Max, and that was given to her because she did everything to the max.
Mm.
My friend said to her, you really should have been called Max, Bethany to the max. And we just have example after example of the things she did that were to the max. I mean, things like washing the dishes was never just a few drops of dish soap in there. It ended up being a mountain load of soap suds all over the kitchen. If she iced cakes, and decorated them, you didn't just put one little thing on each cupcake. Every cupcake was filled with every decoration that you
I
could
love that.
possibly have.
Yes.
Her paintings used to take days, a week to dry, because she just put every part, the paint was just saturated on there. So everything was done to the full, everything was to the max. She was very, very joyful. So very, yeah, named well in that sense.
Yes.
And she had a very, very compassionate heart. I mean, I remember as a little girl, if she heard of a need, so, we started to give the kids pocket money.
Mhm.
And if she heard of someone in need, she would just get her little purse, empty it out on the bench. They need it more than I do, mummy, and off she'd go to play. She
Mm.
had a very, very open heart to give, and this, proved to be true right until she was an early teenager, and she was doing some active fundraising for some needs that she found around the world. So had some big dreams, Jill, to be
Yeah.
part of uh, God's plan to redeem and bring good in this world. Mm.
I love that because she
Mhm.
actually did do that. She fulfilled that.
Yeah.
In March of 2010, Beth began to experience some unusual health issues. Would you share what was going on with her?
So she started year 9 at school and began to sleep after school. So
Hmm.
this is unusual. And we thought, oh, well, she's a teenager, she's, going through a bit of a growth spurt or something like that. And then we were a bit shocked when she talked about some eye problems. We had taken her to the doctor about those and had another specialist appointment booked in, but she began to just laugh about how she wasn't seeing properly and she was bumping into things. And then my mum noticed that she had lost her shoe one day when they were shopping, and she didn't even feel, she was laughing, so I didn't even feel that I'd lost my shoe.
Wow.
She had her appendix taken out because of abdominal pain, but they said to us, there's actually nothing wrong with her appendix, that she seems to have some phantom pains that, didn't seem to relate. All these strange things were happening until uh, really, we'd noticed that the side of her face was looking numb, and she told us that the side of her body, whole side of her body, was numb. So we took her to the hospital. Everyone thought she'd had a stroke. That was the
Mm.
initial sort of diagnosis. And the MRI, when they showed me the MRI, that's when I went into the bathroom and lost my breakfast, because
Mm.
I knew as her mum, I thought they couldn't tell what was wrong with the MRI, but it looked like something was eating her brain. It just looked
Mm.
it was
Wow.
very, very bad. And they said, "Look, there are many things this could be. Could be simply not simply, but a swelling of the brain would show like this. But it could also there's a 1 in a million chance it's this cancer that." But, it's 1 in a million. It won't be that. We've got many, many things that we can
Mm.
eliminate, before that. So don't go there. We will, just check it out. Now, she'd been in Papua New Guinea, some months before that. We had served there for a while, and she'd gone back to visit some friends there. So the first thing they looked at was tropical diseases.
Sure.
It wasn't any of those. And so finally they said, "Look, we need to do a biopsy." And David and I sat in the park that day, and we sang the song that we sang at her dedication, which was "Great is Thy Faithfulness,"
Mm.
and we sang that in the park. I think knowing deep down it was going to be something pretty serious. And when they called in a family meeting the next day, we were as prepared as we could be that this was going to be serious news. And it was. It was an inoperable terminal brain cancer.
Mm.
Um, and they said without treatment, she probably would live only a couple of months. The decline was rapid. Um, yeah. So that sometimes, Jill, I'm sure you also relate to this. You still can't believe that those words have come into your life.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm, mm.
Yeah. Something you never ever would have imagined. I know.
No, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So, how did you respond in those early days after her diagnosis?
Mm. Well, Bethany sat there during that conference,
Hmm.
and we all began to cry, which, and then the hospital offered some social work support and things like that. But within minutes, really, um, Bethany's faith rose up,
Mm.
and it really set the tone for the rest of her journey. She just made some declarations that to this day I believe she couldn't have made without God's Spirit rising up in her.
Yeah.
And she said, "Well," she said, "Jesus can heal me if he wants to." She said, "These words are terrible. This is terrible, but, Jesus is the one who has the ultimate authority over my life. So," and she said, "if this is true, what he promises, then we've got everything. I've got everything I need.
Mm. Wow.
And I'm in his hands. If he wants to heal me, he can. If he wants to take me, he can. And no one has authority over my life, not the words cancer, you know, not the word terminal. That doesn't have authority over my life. Only Jesus has authority over my life." And we were just looking at her. She'd only just turned 15, Jill.
Wow.
She was admitted on her 15th birthday. And we looked at her, we looked at each other, we thought, wow, we had planted, seeds of faith in her, but these had grown to a
Mm.
maturity now that seemed to go way past what we were understanding.
Sure.
And, her dad promised her to be with her and to take her home to the Lord, much like a father would walk a bride down the aisle.
That's
That
right.
was the image that God gave him.
Mm.
And he couldn't rescue her from this disease. He knew only God could, but he could take her home. And
Yes.
and that's what he did. David he became her primary caregiver. Wycliffe gave us all the time off we needed. Our supporters kept supporting us. The church
Mm.
gathered round us. Many people from all around the world were praying, and we had incredible support in that way. Which, yeah, I still
Mm.
still find It was God's cushioning to us through
Oh,
what was
yeah.
just a terrible, terrible blow. But Bethany's attitude through that really helped to set the tone for us, which so, so grateful for.
Mm.
And people began to see that faith within her rise up, and it was a beautiful thing, even in the midst of the terrible suffering she was just about to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing when our children lead us, when we see their faith and they're an example for us.
Well, that's right. I feel like she just took on that baton of faith,
Yeah.
and she ran ahead of us, really.
Uh-huh.
And she still, her faith and the attitude she had through that still encourages me and many others today,
Yeah.
to show us how to live and to die well, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, we experienced that with Hannah as well. Her faith so often was so much stronger than ours was. We felt like we were just following her. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing to see that in your child.
Yes, that's right. And, even though outwardly she was fading away, inwardly, she was being renewed. And we
That's
saw
right.
this God do some incredible inner healing in her life, actually setting her free from the propensity for an eating disorder and body image, and all those things seem to be absolutely healed in her. Well,
Yeah.
she moved ahead with this journey and showing me that, God's ways are higher than ours, because, those things were obviously more important to him than heal than a brain tumor.
Yeah.
That he
Yeah.
did beautiful inner healing in her, that she was actually so free. She was really free from the concerns that a teenager normally has, that
Mhm.
that many women, many men struggle with, that
Exactly.
image, body image. She was very free from that. God did some incredible things in her life, which, yeah, so it was a heartbreaking journey, but it was also beautiful.
Yes. Yeah,
Mm,
I
mm.
completely relate to that. So Beth battled her cancer for a year, which is just almost exactly, well, Hannah did for a year and a day was the
Yeah.
length of her cancer journey. Would you share just a little bit about what that cancer journey was like for you? You've already shared a little bit about how it was for Bethany. How did
Mm,
how did God walk with you through that year?
mm, mm. Yes, well, through Bethany decided to have the chemotherapy and the radiation, which,
Mhm.
so the nature of the disease itself is robbing, the body of all feeling and function and movement.
Yes.
But the treatment is what caused all the pain and nausea and, the burning scars and, things like that. So I think it's interesting that I think I've often heard that saying, the worst thing that could happen, is to lose a child or to see a child suffer, or, those kind of statements are often used. And to see, her being continually getting sicker and sicker, and, throwing up countless times, through this treatment and all the radiation burns and things like that. All I could say is that I felt held through it.
Yeah.
God held me, because it wasn't anything to do with my strength. It wasn't anything to do with Bethany's strength. We know there were just literally thousands of people praying for healing, yes, but also praying that we would have an eternal perspective on
Mm.
this, that it would not, we could see beyond, what was happening right before our eyes now, and that God was working something. When I'm tempted to go back and think, oh, my glory days are behind me, all the good is behind me, I have to, have a renewed mind, and have the mind of Christ, in that, as the Bible says, and look forward, press on forward to what is ahead, is far more glorious. And his promises are that he's going to transform all these trials into something that will just far outweigh them. They won't seem, they seem big right now, all
Yes.
these losses, but God's promised to redeem them, to take them and transform them into something magnificent, and that's what we have to look forward to.
Yeah.
But when there's no answer to the why, it's became, well, how do we live, through this now? How do we keep going? How do I encourage Bethany, in
Mm.
this
Right.
journey?
Yeah.
And so while David also encouraged her in faith for sure, he was that primary caregiver, as I said, lifting her and taking that time to actually physically do nursing and things with her. But felt that my job, obviously looking after our two young daughters, and our son was doing his last year at high school and doing his exams and everything. I had to walk out of Bethany's sick room, which
Mhm.
actually we called the joy room.
Yes, I love
um,
that. Mhm.
but because there was joy in there,
Sure.
joy of the Lord and worship in that space. But when I walked out of being with her in that presence, it was just like it really hit me.
Yes.
Like, how can this be real, Lord? And okay, well, how am I just meant to look after two little girls now, And, in many ways, I didn't do too good a job at that. I was very caught up in my own pain and just surviving. And the girls have forgiven me for, well, we just many times they just went over to other friends to play, because I
Yeah.
thought that was going to be the best thing for them.
Right.
They were like 9 and 7 going through it.
Yeah.
And, in later years, they've both told me how they felt a bit abandoned too, that they weren't part of the journey as much as they wanted to be. And we were trying to protect them,
Yes.
so we were doing the best we could, with what we could at the time. And, um, but we couldn't do it perfectly. And we'd never done
Exactly.
it before. And we were trying to help all of our children.
Right.
That's their story to tell. And they all do love the Lord. And I think, part of the reason that is because Bethany gave them no reason to be bitter,
Mhm.
against the Lord.
Yeah.
It's not that she, enjoyed what she was going through by any means, but she didn't ever, give a reason to not believe. She grasped hold of the promises and the goodness of God, like, that was her lifeline. And
Yeah, absolutely.
she taught her brother and sisters, and she taught her parents to do the same, you
Mm.
know. So very grateful for that gift that she gave us and her siblings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so many similarities in our story. We did the same with our Bethany, trying to kind of protect her and keep her life moving on and keep her busy with activities and her friends. And she was involved with sports and things like that. And yeah, now when we talk to her, she wishes she had been more involved, that we had taken
Mhm.
her with us to radiation treatments and things like that
Yeah.
more so she could have really walked that journey more with the family. But
Yeah.
again, we thought we were protecting her. And like you
Yes.
said, you do the best you can with what you know to do at the time, and God
Mhm.
gives grace for the rest. And
That's
I'm thankful
right,
now
yeah.
that Bethany's an adult. We can talk about those things just like you can with your girls. And yeah, God protected our family through all of that, and that's a blessing.
Yes.
So you have written a couple of books, and one book is specifically about Bethany's journey, and it's called Heartbreakingly Beautiful.
Mhm.
And in that book, you confess that Psalm 91 was a stumbling block for you during Bethany's illness and her heaven going. Talk about that.
Mm. Just before Bethany got sick, we had attended a Youth with a Mission, a YWAM event
Uh-huh.
in New Zealand as a family. And it was a very special time for all our kids in a way, because it was a YWAM's 50th Jubilee anniversary, and they had a huge map, world map, half the size of a football oval. It could fit 800 people on it.
Wow.
And everyone was invited to pray for the nations on this incredibly, I've never seen anything like it. And there was worship, and I looked over and saw Bethany just with her hands out, surrendered. This is literally about 6 weeks before she got sick. And I looked over at her and I thought, wow, it's God's doing something there. And I felt in my spirit him saying, you've said yes to me to go out into the world and share the good news of Jesus, but what about your children? Will you let them go too? And I thought, oh, that's another level, Lord.
Yeah.
And I looked over at Bethany and I thought, you're going to call her, aren't you? And I just had this big sense that I was going to miss her. And I thought at the time it was all about her hope to be a midwife and nurse and help people in Africa. And at that time, she said, later on, she said to me, Mum, God invited me to be part of, his mission. And I said, yes. I said, yes, I know, darling. And I had to say yes too, because I've got to let you go.
Right.
And neither of us knew at that time what that was going to mean, of course. But during that event, we had the Australian band, Sons of Korah, who sing the Psalms. And Bethany's favourite psalm became, of their songs that they'd recorded at the time, wasn't Psalm 91. She had a few different psalms. Psalm 73 was another good one. But Psalm 91, and then as we were listening to it, fast forward a couple of months, and I'm thinking, what about this, Lord, she dedicated her life to you for mission. Like she said that she'd go wherever you wanted her to go. She just wanted to give you glory. She wants to go and help people in this world, Um, this doesn't make sense,
Right.
that you called her to a mission that she can't fulfill now, and none of us can, and this doesn't make any sense. And what about those promises in Psalm 91 that say, if you love me, I'll protect you? That doesn't seem to be making any sense either. Is this real? That because you love us, you'll give us long life, and
Mm.
that doesn't seem to be coming true. So it was a real time of examination, Jill, and just, I guess a journey of looking at what those promises mean, and
Mm.
just discovering that really that's a psalm about, protection from judgment, and we know that psalm was written well before Jesus came, but
Right.
we know now that Jesus, took that judgment for us,
Mm-hmm.
and that we are covered by him. And so, yes, in him, all these promises come true, that we can have long life because we love him, because he loved us first, we can have
Yeah.
long life. And so began to look at those Psalms and the promises of God in light of eternity, not just of the short space of time, that we have here, whether we have, 16 or 18 years of life, or whether we live till 80 or 90 or 100.
Right.
It's a short time. And the purpose of that time is to give God glory with our lives. And you know, Bethany she had to learn the lessons that some of us are given a lot longer to learn, but she learnt those, and she was trusting, God. And so that I can look at that psalm now and say, yes, you have given her long life,
Mm. That's
long
right.
life in you. It's a long eternal life.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of those, ways that I looked at God's promises definitely began to shift and change the way I looked at prayer, the way I looked at the scriptures. I mean, we had joined Wycliffe because we love God's word and wanted people around the world to have those scriptures.
Yeah.
But now looking at them, they became our lifeline now. If the promises are true, then we did not have to fear. We could still feel very sad,
Mm-hmm.
but we did not have to fear the death that
Yes.
was approaching. We didn't have to fear the future. Um,
Yes.
what an amazing hope we have.
That's right. Yeah. That's beautiful. So you recently passed the 13-year mark since Bethany went to heaven. How do you feel like your grief has evolved over that time?
It feels a bit fresh now talking about it, but that's
Sure.
okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I've learnt that that's okay.
Yes.
I think I actually lost my brother 8 years before Bethany, and that was to
Oh, wow.
cancer as well.
Mm.
And in some ways, we learnt some lessons about the ways not to grieve, through his loss. As in, many of the members of the family did not want to talk about my brother Chris at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a way in the past that people have tried to deal with grief of a loss of a loved one, because without resources and support, and it's been very hard to even know what to do. My parents did not know what to do with the loss of their son. They
Oh,
didn't know
sure.
who to talk to, and so it took about 5 years before we were free to talk about him again.
Mm.
So in some
Wow.
ways, we set that for our family, and we said to our kids, You can talk about Bethany whenever you want to, whenever you need to. If it causes us to cry, it's okay because we've got lots of tears to get out.
Yes,
We
that's
miss
right.
her. There's an empty spot at the table now, and it was getting through the trauma of what happened as well. But I wanted to give you an example that has helped me, if that's okay. It
Yeah,
comes
please
from
do.
Dr. Carolyn Leaf. Some of your listeners might have heard of her, but a Christian neuroscientist, and she speaks a lot about mental health and grief and those sorts of things. But this has really stuck with me and helped me because rather than thinking about grief diminishing or grief getting better or grief fading away, we know that, or even growing.
Mm,
She talks about grief as being always being sort of the same size, and she has three jars. One's a very small jar, and then the medium size, and then a big jar, and she's got three stones the same size, and she puts a stone in each one. Now, in the first one, the very small jar, that stone almost completely fills that jar, and that's what it feels like at first. I mean, that
mm,
is your whole life, the grief. Then the middle jar, the stone is the same size, but the jar has grown. The
mhm.
jar's bigger, and there's room for other things in your life. Your life has actually expanded and grown. And then I guess I'm at that third one now, I think 13 years later, where the grief is still the same. It's sitting in that space, still same space. But I've grown through this, I've got more of a capacity for compassion and love and joy and all the feelings, as well as the lament and the sorrow and the confusion that is still there. It's like also God has grown my heart, stretched my heart. Does that resonate with you at all, Jill?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's very accurate. At least it's accurate with my experience for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Mhm.
it just means that and even recently, I've had continued counselling. We had some initial counselling paid for by Wycliffe, which was just terrific. That
Yeah.
was a great blessing, and so that we slowly were able to return to work and ministry and things like that. But another important mark was about the 3.5 year mark, where it felt to me like I guess I moved to that middle
Mm.
jar,
Yeah.
that I there was joy as well as sorrow. And then just recently, 6 months ago or so, we had some more couples, like a life debrief, and it helped us to just really understand that. I suppose if I go back another step, I used to really feel quite afraid of my grief. I would feel that, if I'd had a good day and then, and was feeling the joy of looking forward to seeing Bethany and enjoying the rest of the family. And then the next day, something would trigger me. I would feel very discouraged and like I was failing God, failing my family, that I was going back into a sad place. And, it took me a long time to realize that it was okay to feel those feelings at the time if something had triggered me, that
Yes.
there was obviously something else to grieve, another loss to mourn. And this even, 13 years later, I'm still learning that it was okay, that grief is not, it's not a linear journey. You keep going through different things. And for instance, last week, another one of Bethany's friends had a baby.
Mm.
And,
Yes.
so while I'm happy on one hand, I had a good cry as well, because I'm not going to have a grandchild from Bethany. I'm going to
Sure.
have a son in law, a wedding to celebrate babies. We didn't get graduations and all those
Right.
sorts of things. And so, rather than feeling condemned like I used to, that I'm somehow going backward in my grief, I now say, Lord, well, that's okay. I can feel sad about that, and then return to thanksgiving,
Mm.
for having Bethany and for all the wonderful things that she was to us and continues to be in the world through her legacy. And so it's both. It's both the lament and the joy together now. And some
Yes.
days one kind of feels stronger than the other, but
Sure.
overall that's life now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A balance of lament and joy. I love that.
Yes,
And just
yes,
to
yeah.
acknowledge that both can exist at the same time.
That's right. And, apparently science shows if we don't allow ourselves to feel the sorrow, then we can't feel the joy. And that's
That's
where
right.
that numbness comes in, so if we're trying to hide the pain and we're trying to cover it up and not feel it because it's just trying to distract ourselves or whatever from feeling that pain, then we also can't feel the joy.
That's right.
We can't feel that thanksgiving and the blessings. So it's important to allow ourselves, with support. I think
Hmm.
that's important. We don't have to be alone in that. Call out and get some help, but it's okay to feel that sorrow and to lament
Yes.
what has been lost.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Absolutely. This concludes the first half of my conversation with Lynda Wake. Be sure to come back next week as we get deeper into her story, including her advice for newly bereaved parents, what she's learned about the character of God, and how she's experienced His faithfulness over the years. We're also going to have our first ever giveaway, so you'll definitely want to come back for that. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to sharing the rest of our chat with you next Wednesday.